Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm so glad that you're here. For those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a life coach for physicians. And in this podcast, we dive into all the areas of challenge that come up in our physician lives. We talk about the personal and the professional, the thoughts and the emotions. And for this month, I'm going to be focusing on, what I consider sort of basic human fundamentals. In obesity medicine, we talk about the 4 pillars, not unique at all to obesity medicine, but we talk about sleep, nutrition, movement, stress, all of these really important areas of our lives. And so we're going to be talking about that this month. If you're listening to this podcast as it comes out in real time, in September, there will be multiple episodes that highlight a different area that we're going to focus on. So today we are going to be talking about sleep. Jumping right in with the big topic. Now, what this is not going to be is a lecture about how you should sleep, because we've been there, we get it, we know it's important. What it is going to be is a discussion of why are we struggling with sleep. And for the sake of this discussion, we are going to put aside the issues that deal with night shift and call. Night shift, call, right, that is implicit in a lot of physician careers. And outside of truly toxic situations where you are always on call, where your sleep is frequently disrupted night after night after night after night, right? Because you are not allowed that off time for whatever reason. That is a toxic situation. That is not a livable situation. That is a different topic. What we are going to be talking about today and really focusing on is, where are we sort of giving over our power when it comes to sleep, and what do we need to take back for ourselves? So this is going to be a good one. I'm going to start by sharing a story from my own experience. As I was preparing for this discussion, I was reflecting on a time in my life when I was really, kind of at a low point when it came to burnout. And I remember this night very specifically. So at the time, I was working full spectrum family medicine. I was delivering babies. My own children were pretty young. I think they were 3 and 6 at that time. We'd gotten through the toddler sleep issues, so I wasn't usually getting woken up by them, but I would get woken up by my pager. And I was really not doing well. From the outside, I looked very functional, right? Because we're really good at that. I was getting up every morning, I was going to work. I was putting food in my mouth and clean clothes on my body, right? Taking care of everyone and everything. But I wasn't sleeping well. I was dripping in anxiety and overwhelm. As I know will resonate with some of you, that image of just like being so steeped in it. And I was crying every day driving to work. Like I just was like, I just can't go in. And I got to a day where I couldn't fall asleep. Now, as a kid, I had a hard time falling asleep, but since medical school, I can pretty easily fall asleep at nighttime, I think, because probably like most, right, I probably don't usually get adequate sleep. So it was really unusual that I had a whole night where I couldn't sleep. Now, if somebody had hooked me up to sleep electrodes, right, we probably would have seen that I was falling in and out of light sleep cycles, blah, blah, blah. that is not relevant here. What's relevant is I had the experience where I was so anxious and so wired up that I couldn't sleep. And this was after months and months of like feeling really pretty poorly. And I finally sort of felt like I had reached that threshold where I couldn't continue doing things as I was doing because I was going to hurt somebody. Now, as far as I know, I wasn't making poor clinical decisions. As far as I know, nothing happened during that time. This was years and years ago. Right? But I knew that if I kept in the state where I was, and now I was not sleeping, right? I was not going to be making safe decisions. And this was, I was primarily an outpatient provider with some OB work, right? That would sometimes be, obviously, it would be in the hospital, but sometimes keep me up all night. But the problem is that I was in such a state and not prioritizing my health and my sleep and my emotional patterns, right? That I couldn't sleep. And I knew that that was really fundamental. And so that really brought to my attention that I needed to do some work. When I talk to the physicians that I coach, sleep is an issue that comes up over and over again. And it comes up in different ways. Some people will identify very clearly that they do not get enough sleep. And sometimes that's call related. And I will say, not infrequently, unfortunately, it's that there are not enough people in the call group and people are being asked to do more overnight call. I've had women physicians tell me quite frequently that they get called about things in the middle of the night when they're on call that their male physician colleagues would not be called about. Updates from the nursing staff, for example, that don't need any action and aren't new information. But anyhow, I hear from physicians who stay up too late, right? Revenge procrastination, where they feel like the only free time that they get is, after the kids go to bed or kind of after all the work has been done, right? They may have stayed up late charting or doing chores around the house or, on their phones. And they feel like the only time that they get is in the middle of the night when it's really quiet, but then they are not getting adequate sleep, right? And inevitably, right, this leads to crappy mornings where people struggle to get out of bed. They're going to get out of bed because they know they got to get up and go to work, right? We are not the type of people who frequently, just hit snooze and just like, oh, no, I'll get to work when we get to work. No, we get up and go to work, but we may walk into work grumpy, exhausted, shoving donuts in our mouth, right? All sorts of things that we don't want to be feeling. And you can see this is all tied into problems with sleep. Now, if we go back, we have learned sleep deprivation as a lifestyle, right? Think about your time in medical school and residency. Even if you trained with, work hour restrictions, you still experienced sleep deprivation as part of the acculturation of medicine. You absolutely did, right? We all did. When that becomes your way of life, that when you are not on call, when you are not working night shifts, that you perpetually put off sleep or minimize its importance, that's where we run into problems. And it's so normal and natural if that has happened to you. This is not about self-blame, but you are the only person who is going to be in a position to fix it. And that's really what we're talking about today. Okay, so what do we need to do to get started on this problem? Now, again, I'm not giving a lecture on the importance of sleep. We're past that part, right, in our, our knowledge of sleep as human beings, right? We get it. We know that sleep is important for our patients who are dealing with chronic illness, chronic pain, who are wanting to work on lifestyle habits like good nutrition, good exercise. Like we know the importance of sleep. But I want you to sit down and think for a moment, What are my thoughts about sleep? Now, some of this might be, what are my thoughts about myself as a sleeper? But some of it is also like, what are my judgmental thoughts about sleep, right? What have I absorbed from other people when I think about sleep? Many of us could point to attendings, colleagues, right, role models who seem to function on very little sleep. They always seem to be, perky and together, or maybe they're not perky, maybe they're not happy, but we consider them an excellent physician, right? And we want to be just like them, even though we know that they're chronically sleep deprived, right? What are your thoughts? Do you have thoughts like, I'll sleep when I'm dead? Do you have thoughts like, I shouldn't need this much sleep? So and so doesn't need this much sleep. Do you have thoughts of, well, I can't go to bed because I've got this thing to do? I can't go to bed until I've finished all my notes. I can't go to bed until XYZ thing happens. Do you think that you should just be able to fall asleep when you get into bed rather than have a wind down routine? What are all of the thoughts that come up for you around sleep? I, for many years, had a thought of, I'm not a good sleeper. I've always been a relatively light sleeper. And I just had this notion, especially as I was going through busier and busier periods in my life, that I just wasn't a good sleeper because I never seemed to fall as deeply asleep as other people, and I did not wake up rested. Regardless of the actual quality of my sleep, when I identify with the thought that I'm not a good sleeper, I create the situation that I am not a good sleeper, right? Because I will tell myself, well, I don't know, you're just never going to feel rested. You're never going to feel good. I'm not going to set myself up for success there. It isn't all about, I don't know, some wishy-washy idea of manifesting good sleep. That's not what I'm talking about. But the things that we think over and over and over again about our sleep matter. So if we tell ourselves that we shouldn't need this much sleep, that sleep is for the weak, that a good physician or a good surgeon, never needs to sleep, that our physician status means that we should be able to function really well on chronic sleep deprivation, right? If we have all of these thoughts running around in the background of our mind, we are not going to create a situation where we prioritize sleep, where we, see it as something that is really critical for our performance in our work or for our well-being in general, right? If you're not sleeping well, you are less likely to eat well. You are less likely to exercise, right? All of these things are connected. And again, we recognize that logically, academically, but are we living that way? Are we prioritizing sleep? It all starts with the thoughts that we have about our sleep. Again, that might be judgments about your own sleep. It might be judgments that you've picked up along the way about how much sleep you should or shouldn't get. And most of us are really discounting the importance of sleep, especially for us, because we have decided at some point that to be a good physician, it means we can't sleep, right? If it was important that we slept, right, our jobs wouldn't be set up the way that they are. That is a huge fallacy, right? And, it ties into this idea that comes up over and over again that the business side of medicine is inconvenienced by physicians having human bodies, right? It is inconvenienced by us having a need for sleep, a need for food, rest, leisure time, vacation, time off to grieve, time off for illness. All of those things are extremely inconvenient to the business of medicine. All right, topic for a different time. But what are your thoughts about sleep? After you've written down, and I really do encourage you to write down your thoughts, I want you to go through and star the ones that are not helpful thoughts. Okay? Star the ones that are not helpful thoughts and see in the proportion of it. Is that all of the thoughts that you wrote down? Is it most of the thoughts that you wrote down? Are there any helpful thoughts there? And helpful thoughts, and I'm going to give you a few, and you're welcome to borrow these. Helpful thoughts will help us to create situations where we are sleeping better, where we are better rested. So here are some helpful sleep thoughts, right? So instead of thinking, I'm not a good sleeper, I now choose to think, sleep is really important. Sleep is really important. It's very simple. Sleep is important to my life. Sleep is important to me being able to do a good job as a physician. Sleep is really important for me being a good parent. I know, and I've talked about this before for myself, that I feel like I have a much better day and that I'm a much kinder parent in the morning in particular if I get up and I go for my morning walk. Talked about that before. We'll come back to it with one of the episodes where we talk more about physical activity. That is kind of my morning moving meditation, if you will. I get a lot of energy out of it. I feel like I have time for myself. It sets me up to have a better day. So part of my thinking about sleep is that I need to go to bed so that I can wake up and have that good morning experience, right? That has become wrapped in. And so if I am screwing around on my phone the night before and I recognize, oh, right, I do want to get up. I do want to make sure that I have enough sleep so that I can get up, and get going and have that experience, I will put myself to bed because I have remembered in that moment, oh, yeah, it's really important that I get good sleep because I've had the experience that when I don't sleep well or I stay up too late, right, then I'm inclined to snooze the alarm and not get that morning routine in. And then, I wake up at normal time with my husband, we get going, but I don't have that time for myself and I'm more cranky with everybody. So, what are the helpful thoughts that you would like to start thinking? And go for easy, low hanging fruit here. Sleep is important. It's important for my daytime work. It's important for my relationships that I get good sleep. You don't have to make this complicated. And we don't have to jump to, well, I sleep 8 to 10 hours. We don't have to do any of that. I just want you to identify some more helpful thoughts that you will choose to start thinking on the regular until they become really planted in your brain. All right, next, I want us to identify what is the effect of good sleep on your life. So, similar to our previous exercise, right? Thinking about the thoughts, like what is the actual impact to you when you get good sleep or when you don't get good sleep? So, I've said for myself, right, that I find myself, I have a better day in my work and I have a better experience in my home life when I have slept and then woken up early to do that morning routine, right? Those are very linked together in my brain. And in order to get up early, I need to go to bed at the right time in order to be able to get up early, as I've said. So it's important for me to get enough sleep, right? To figure out sort of what that number is and to back calculate when do I need to start winding down and going to bed because it has such a dramatic impact on my day. You may not know that for yourself right now, but I want you to identify what is really challenging in your day that is connected to your lack of sleep, your lack of prioritizing sleep. How does it feel different on a night when you did get enough sleep? How are you different? How are your interactions with other people different? How easy is it or hard is it to do your work based on whether you've gotten good sleep or not, right? Consider those impacts and decide for yourself what's important. I have a physician client that I'm working with right now, and one of her dreams is to have a dog. This is really important to her. And yet, the way that things are currently set up, and part of it has to do with a very difficult work circumstance. So I don't want to minimize that because that is absolutely a part of the story for her and so many people that I talk to. It really is, and we are not going to minimize that here. But in order to do something that will take up time and energy, like having a dog, right? Like starting a new hobby, like training for a marathon. Even we don't usually think about having kids this way, but, to be the kind of parent that we want to be, we ought to start having good sleep habits as much as we possibly can before those children arrive. When we think about that thing that she wants for herself, right? Having a dog and knowing sort of what it takes to have a dog and really be involved with that dog, right? To really experience that. It will take some things, and it's really helpful to think about how does sleep impact that? Because right now, when there is struggle to get enough sleep, when there is struggle to get out of bed in the morning, when there is struggle to get to work because we're just so run down. If we threw a dog into the mix, that would be total stress and chaos, and it might lead us to believe that we can't or shouldn't have a dog. But if that is something that is really important to us, we can use that as a driver, right? And use this idea of thoughts and impact to create a better experience now so that we have the time and space and energy, right, for that thing that we want. So in this example, right, what do dogs need in the morning? Dogs need, to go out for a walk and have a little activity, right, early in the day. So in order to do that, she's going to need to sort of back calculate, all right, well, if I need to get to work at this time and I want to spend, 30 to 60 minutes taking care of the dog in the morning, including walking, playing, brushing, whatever that looks like. Okay, well, and it takes me this long to drive to work. And, I'd really like to have breakfast or coffee or whatever that is. What time do I need to wake up? And if I need to wake up at that time in order to have this thing, and especially with the external accountability that a dog creates, I need to be well rested. I'm going to need to go to bed earlier, right? And not stay up and revenge procrastinate as we so often do. And that means that I'm going to need to create a better going to bed ritual, experience, bedtime routine, whatever we want to call it, so that I go to bed, I get adequate sleep, I'm able to wake up in the morning and do those things before I go to work. Now, that's such a practical human example, but how often are we just kind of running through our days without giving consideration to what kind of a morning do I want to have, knowing that I need to get to work at such and such time, which I may or may not have a choice about. That I've got people in my life, I've got kids, I've got a spouse, I've got an elderly parent, I've got a dog or a cat. Or it's really important for me to just get out and spend some time with myself or go to that exercise class. Think about that morning experience that you want, right? That is the impact that we want. And what do we need to do in order to create it? We have to think about it the night before. So the homework piece here is the question to answer for yourself is, what is the impact of sleep, good and bad? And if I really want something specific, how am I going to create that? Utilizing these ideas. The final thing that we consider here are, what are the action steps that will help us to get more sleep, right? So we've talked about kind of the thoughts and the impact. The emotions are kind of baked into that, right? What do we actually want to do? What are we willing to do? What are we not willing to do in order to get better sleep. Now, this is where we can consider all of the things that we know about sleep logically that you probably counsel your patients on. Like, you need a bedtime routine. It's not just for kids, right? We can't be on our screens late at night and think we'll just fall asleep. We can't stay up too late and then expect that we're just going to magically fall asleep and feel rested enough, right? We need to figure out, when do I need to go to bed? And once I know when I need to go to bed, I need to decide, what am I going to do and when do I start it in order to wind myself down. Now, because I wake up so early, I find myself by 8 or 9 o'clock like really dragging. And I try not to leave any tasks to that time because I'm no good at them at that time. Yes, if I needed to, right? If I was on call, if I was doing a certain thing, yeah, I'm going to pull it together. But that's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about our regular sort of day-to-day experience. So if I'm starting to feel really tired at that time, okay, then it's time to initiate the things that I'm going to do to get ready for bed. So usually in the colder months, right, I'm taking a bath. That bath I know will make me drowsy. So anything that needs to get done is going to get done before that. If I need to get lunches prepped for the day before, I don't know if there's any, kind of other little tasks. I make sure my workout clothes are ready to go because I'm going to, change into those really quickly and get going. Try and get those things set up the night before. Sometimes people will need to incorporate, a more specific bedtime routine. They might, be someone who uses melatonin or other medications, right? When do you need to take that? Because you had the experience of when it's going to impact your sleep. Do you need to do something relaxing where you can't be on your phone? I do not take my phone in the bathtub. I do not have it in the bathroom. I know that some people, there's always those pictures of like, ads where women are like, they have their iPad and their Kindle reader or whatever, and they're reading in the back. I do not do that. I do not like that idea. That freaks me out. So I don't do that. So I'm reading. I'm reading usually when I'm in the bathtub. And within a few minutes, I start feeling pretty drowsy. And that's my cue. Okay, it's had its therapeutic effect. I'm going to go to bed now, right? I might read for another few minutes, and then I know that I am tired and I'm ready for sleep, right? Thankfully, that process is not a long, drawn out affair for me. I don't need a tremendous amount of wind down because of the way my day is set up. I'm usually feeling fairly tired by that time. But it depends on what's going on for you, right? What kind of a wind down do you need right now based on what your situation is? So, no judgment. If you are currently staying up late working on charts or find yourself with a lot of energy, in the evening, I want you to think about you and your circumstances right now. And again, sort of thinking about the morning or the impacts of good sleep. What do we need to create for you in order to get good sleep at nighttime, right? When do you need to start? Is there anything that you need to do, right? Like melatonin or something to help wind down, or the, what do they call it? The sleepy girl mocktail with tart cherry juice and magnesium. I've tried it. It's okay. Um, like whatever it is that you want to do to wind down. Think about what those things are and start to figure out, like, what is the timeline of all of these activities. Now, if you are currently generally staying up late at night charting, you are going to need to still decide that there is a cutoff time at which time you go to bed. Because if you are telling yourself, this goes back to the thoughts piece, if you're telling yourself over and over again that you can't sleep until this thing is finished, it will take you longer and it will ultimately not allow you to do this process to create a better day tomorrow. You'll need to decide, when do I need to go to bed, and you're going to need to call it quits. Now, when we do that, when we decide, okay, now is the time that I stop. For example, like I will stop doing any work at 9 o'clock because then it's time for my bedtime routine to start kicking in so that I am asleep by 9:30 or 10, which allows me enough hours, right, to go and have the morning that I want. If we do that work, eventually our brain is going to notice that we are leaving charts undone, that we need to have a different process for getting that work done because we have this routine. If we don't do that, right, if we say, well, I have to get these charts done before I can do my bedtime routine, we are not prioritizing sleep. Even if we're taking those other steps, we are still saying that that is more important than my sleep. You can absolutely choose to do that. But if your goal is to feel better, you know what doing that is creating. And I don't say this to minimize the level of work that we have to do, the cognitive load, the emotional burden, right? All of those things are very real. But if we continue to ignore our bodies and not get adequate sleep, it all stacks up against us and it contributes to burnout and contributes to the never-ending sense of exhaustion that so many of us feels. It feeds into the notion that in order to be physicians, we have to be chronically ignoring ourselves, right? Chronic sleep deprivation always, that we're not allowed to eat when it's the time for us to eat, that we're not allowed to pee. We have to not buy into that narrative anymore if we want to feel better. If you feel hunky-dory as things are and you want to continue that, you are welcome to do so. I can't think of anybody who wants that for themselves, but they're probably not listening to this podcast, so it's not an issue. We want better things for ourselves. This is some of the work. What are the thoughts that you have about sleep that are not helping you? How can we choose to think different thoughts? How can we be really clear on the impacts of good sleep and the impacts of poor sleep? I invite you to think of as many examples as possible. You might say, hey, I am constantly snacking or drinking way too much coffee on days that I don't sleep well. I don't feel well when I do that. I get migraines when I don't sleep. Whatever it is, write it down, right? And then finally, think about actions that you want to start taking in order to help your sleep. Don't make it a 12-step plan. Make it simple, make it doable, and figure out the timeline in order to try and get the amount of rest that you would like to start getting. All right. I think that's enough for today because there's a lot baked into this. This is an episode that you're probably going to want to come back to, especially if you're currently driving or walking as you listen. Sit down and actually do some of this work and write it down because that does help our brains. You might be very surprised at what comes out when you take the time to write it down, and especially when you're doing that in kind of a judgment-free way, right? When you just let yourself write. What are all these thoughts? What is the impact? Oh, crap. Well, I realized that, I'm really struggling to get my exercise done because I'm so exhausted. Oh, I have all these migraines. Um, hmm, you know, that does seem to happen more when I'm not sleeping well, right? Be very clear on the impacts of good sleep and not good sleep. And you might have to start with the not good sleep, right? Because you may not remember what it's like to sleep well. And then what are those action steps? So come back, listen to the episode again, get your journal out, right? Be ready to write some things down. This will have a huge beneficial impact if you do this work. You will sleep better. You will be clear on what your priorities are, right? You will be successful, but you have to do the work. No one can do this for you. You can go read all the articles you want on the impacts of sleep quality, sleep deprivation. You can go do all of that. This is the actual work, though, that makes the difference in your life. Okay, so if you have done this and if you have gained some insights, If you have noticed that your sleep has improved after you've done this, please, please, please send me a message and let me know what it's meant to you. All right, that's what I have for you this week. Take care, have a great week, and until next time, bye-bye. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.